What's up YouTube fam, Robbie C here, and today we're gonna ask the question, the Zone SS, a necessary disc or not? Should they have just made the zone overstable and let that be enough, or should they have just never changed the zone at all? All these questions and more answered. Before we dive in, we have to ask the most important question of the day. How you doing today, Connor? You having a good one?
So catch me if I fall.
The Zone, one of the most classic approach discs of all time, if not the most iconic approach disc of all time. Obviously, here on this channel, we love the pig is love, pig is life, but we also appreciate that the Zone is just a really good disc. And Discraft, the smart company that they are, decided, man, people love this approach disc. We should take that momentum and sort of run with it and create slight variations and maybe release them in premium plastics, because people do seem to like that, and let people falling in love with the disc actually benefit our company. And I think it's a pretty clever idea. So they have the Zone, and I remember several years ago I had just signed with Foundation and we were shooting a video. It was me, Brody Smith, Trevor, and Hunter, and we drove down to Charlotte to let Brody was flying out, and because he was flying out, or we drove to Raleigh. It was one of the two. Anyways, we drove to a town and I hit my first ace on the channel at that course. But one of the big fun moments that I remember is that Brody had a prototype Zone OS in his bag, and as we threw it, we were like, wow, that thing is beefy. Including especially this one, where you can see the flight numbers on this one were beef. And as the Zone OS has been used more and more, I think people have definitely found that there is a slot for it. I think about even in the Foundation crew, I believe that both Connor and Trevor both bag a Zone OS, and they use it for these sort of approach shots that they need to have flex lines on, or they just need the disc to not go super far. So I would say definitely has found some use. Recently, however, they said, we took the Zone one way. What if instead of having a more overstable zone, what if we had an understable zone? And I, like you, probably asked the question, so Discraft wanted to just give me a seasoned zone that's fresh? Is that necessary? Honestly, I don't know. So today, we're gonna find out, is it necessary? How does it fly? Is it actually less stable than a zone? What does it fly like? So we have a fresh Z Zone, we have a fresh Z Zone SS, and we have a fresh Z Zone OS. 3 versions of the Zone, all in premium plastic, because once again, if it's good, make it in premium plastic. So why not first throws of the day into, every time, you guys know the Robbie C channel, we try to demonstrate how discs fly, and that's a huge piece of grass, so that wasn't gonna show anything, was it? Every time, we just end up with crazy wind. So we have a pretty nasty headwind coming right at us. Let's go ahead and go overstable to understable as we let these things fly out. And we'll start off with the Zone OS. T-pad, not great, kind of slippery. Let's not hurt ourselves here. Here we go. You can see we even thought about trying to throw that on some anhyzer. No. What a yoke. All right, now for the standard zone. Looks like it was more overstable than the Zone OS, but I think it's just because we let the fly plate get exposed. And then last but not least, blown by the wind. If this is understable, it should hold really straight. Oh. Now let's throw out some biases that just occurred here. Those were my first 3 shots of the day. We're literally fresh out of the car trying to rip the discs. That's why we started with the most overstable, because I knew even if I threw it really well, it was just gonna do what a Zone OS does, fall to the ground and die, which is great, because that's what you should expect and know that that's a disc is going to do. So I think that we got a hold of the Zone SS the best, but I wasn't ready for it to not only not fade, but to even have a little turn to it. Granted, we were into a headwind, but you're never gonna see turn out of a Zone OS. You are only going to see anhyzer that you forcibly put it on. In the right winds, you could see some turn out of a zone, but once again, it'd have to be a pretty decent headwind coming at you, and most often You're only going to see that turn when you also put it on anhyzer. But this is a fresh disc. That was the first time that disc was ever thrown, and it turned. That's spicy. Now here, we're going to go ahead and we're going to try it out on a forehand. This is like a 200 and I would say like 93, 94 foot hole. So the odds of me getting a Zone OS all the way there, I would say, are less than 1. So Mr. YouTube man, you're saying there's a chance? No, I'm not, but for science. Let's see what we can do. Woo! It feels good to throw out your rotator cuff first forehand of the day. A smart man would not throw the Zone OS first, but once again, it's not going to go that far anyways. Yeah. It didn't even make it to the tree. Didn't even make it past the tree. All right, now for the real challenges. Let's try Z Zone. Okay, that one came out on anhyzer a little bit. I always have to remind myself when I'm forehanding just regular zones that I don't have my groove top for that extra, my ringer top for that extra tack and pull. So because of that, I end up over gripping them because I don't want them to slip out. So not necessarily the best pull, but don't worry, we're gonna have plenty more opportunities to show it off. Let's see what the Zone SS does. Okay, Zone got pulled on a little bit of anhyzer and it still fought out. Zone SS not showing me that it has a lot of inherent bite to it off the rip, which is very curious. And it's in moments like these that you kind of have to ask yourself the most important question. Do you know the Muffin Man? No, the other important question. How many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop? Seriously? Okay, I get what you're stepping at. Yeah. Why would I want a zone that doesn't fade? And that's what we're here to find out. Now, to be fair, we haven't really given the Zone SS chances to fly on a ton of hyzer because we threw it into a headwind. We threw it on flat to anhyzer. So let's see, once again, when we go Zone OS on a little bit of hyzer, bad things happen. Yeah, it goes like a cool 200 feet, dying the whole time. Let's try a zone. That one we just didn't release with any gusto whatsoever because I think we're a little afraid. The hard part of this line is that I really like, honestly, this is just a straight shot because the trees on the left are grown up. This tree on the right makes the hyzer tough. But let's see Zone SS, what it does. You could see, started on hyzer, stood up a good little bit, carried straight, and then still had to finish at the end. So the Zone SS does hyzer. We just have to give it a chance to hyzer. But this still brings up the interesting question, why would I want a disc like the Zone SS when I can just throw a zone and really let it be a zone? Well, I think one of the first things is that we kind of teased it in the beginning, but I think that the Zone SS is going to fly like a beat-in zone. And some of you don't have the luxury, the time, or you haven't hit enough trees, I guess, with your zone in order to get your zone to fly like a beat-in zone. So if this is a disc slot that you're looking for, and you are wishing that your zone did certain things that maybe you've watched a pro do with their zone, in a similar way to how we refer to the Buzz SS as the people's buzz, well, you can replicate certain flights that you're seeing out of a zone or a pro throwing a zone with the Zone SS right out of the gate. And I think that's really beautiful. I will say, when I was on Instagram Live today, unboxing this delivery from Foundation, I had the Zone SS inside of it, and I asked people how they felt about it and what they enjoyed. And one of the biggest things that someone mentioned was that to them, the Zone SS was like the Luna and the Zone had a baby, because it flies more overstable than the Luna, but it's not as understable or overstable as the Zone. I thought that was an interesting take. So I decided for a final comparison piece in the video, I would have a Zone SS, and a Luna. because we're going to find out if this really is true, that this disc exists between the two. So here we are. We're going to go across the scale, and we're going to go with a zone, trying to loosen the back up a little bit because we definitely felt it on that one that we were tight. Starting with the zone. Nose up, pulled it right, but it faded pretty much as soon as it hit its right point, it started fading. Let's go to the Zone SS right down the middle. You can see, hold straight, but then still has solid fade at the end. And then last but not least, the most overstable run of Lunas that exists out there. Yeah. I would say if that's the most overstable run of Lunas, which are rare and hard to come by, it sits right in the middle. How did it do distance-wise? Well, I think that this is pretty interesting. You've got clearly the most fade out of a stock standard zone, the most distance coming out of the Luna, and similar distance to the zone, but not as much fade, is the Zone SS. So I think that when you're running the most overstable Luna, you're going to get some reliable fade. But if you have stock Lunas, then I would say that, yeah, this is probably a pretty comparable piece that flies. As far as the zone, it just doesn't fade as much. Let's try uphill one time just to see, throw them back of the tee box, if we get similar results. Here we are, 3 discs in hand. We'll go Luna once again, or sorry, zone first, once again. Hung it wide, and it faded. Zone SS. Super straight, no fade whatsoever. And then last but not least, let's try the Luna. Very similar flights between the Luna and the Zone SS. Let's go check the distances. Once again with fade, all the way over there is the zone. And then further and straight, you have here the Zone SS and the Luna. The Luna not fading as much that time coming up the hill, so I won't drag it on much longer. Final thoughts time? There is a brutally obvious difference between the Zone and the Zone OS. These discs, completely necessary. You're never gonna find a run of zones that is comparable to a run of Zone OSs. I think this disc was absolutely necessary. They should have capitalized on it. They did. And I see a world where if someone bags both of these discs, I'm like, that makes perfect and complete sense. Stepping over to the Zone SS compared to the Zone. I think that these discs also fly pretty different from one another. I think this disc surprisingly straight. Like it almost feels like heresy to call it a zone because it just, unless encouraged, it just flies really straight. Now, as someone who has really looked forward to having honestly, a Luna that has consistent, like, more fade, that's been the really encouraging part about the North Cove Lunas, is that they do fade. And we've now released a zone that flies very similar to a fading Luna. That's awesome. I do think that it's interesting how I wasn't getting as much push out of, I got more push out of the Luna the one time, so I think I'd have to bag it for quite some time in order to see, does it fly like that? But I think if you're looking for an overstable throwing putter that flies similar distances or doesn't drop out of the sky as much as the Zone, I think this is necessary, especially considering that the Luna, overstable Lunas are hard to find. I think that's where we really you have to accept and say, do I want an overstable Luna? Because that's what this flies like. I would describe it more like a overstable Luna than an understable Zone. So do I think this could be renamed like Luna OS? Possibly. If you're a zone lover, then you probably don't have a ton of need for this disc. I will go ahead and admit it, because I think if you're a zone lover, you probably have seasoned zones that fly pretty much like what this is supposed to fly like. But if you're new to the zone world and you're like, hey, I really love having this overstable one, but I want a straight flying approach disc, the Zone SS might be for you. And the last shout out that I'll give for this disc actually goes out to the guy editing this video, the one and only Trevor Staub, because I think about when he was describing the Slammer to me and why the Slammer is such a beautiful disc for him is because there are times where he just doesn't want the crashy approach style of the Zone, especially on his forehand. He's not looking for that dump out of the sky feeling that a Zone always gives him. So the Slammer fills that slot perfectly. So if you're not a fan of the thumb track, if you're not a fan of how some discs like that feel, I think this could be a very reliable forehand upshot disc for you, because if you're just not putting a ton of pop on your forehands, then this is going to have that carry for you, and it probably still will have that fade, especially when thrown on hyzer, to be a reliable thrower for you without, like we said, the dump of the Zone, which is nice. So at the end of the day, do I think that this was necessary from Discraft? Yeah. I think when I'm looking at like, oh, do we need another like flippy 7-speed? Probably not. I think that Discraft has a pretty robust lineup when it comes to especially faster discs, mid-ranges. They've got that definitely covered. They even have, I guess they could come up with more driver options, but even then when you consider like the Avenger and then the cranks and all these different variants, they've got a pretty robust lineup, and I think that this disc definitely fills a niche slot that people are always looking for and struggling to find. I know I especially want a throwing putter slash not a mid-range that goes pretty far but has reliable fade, and this could be the perfect slot. So I think that my A5 is in trouble for a little bit because the Zone SS may be slotting into that slot perfectly, but we'll have to report back and let you guys know in a little while how it's going. So as always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. Please make it fantastic for someone else too. Let me know in the comments down below, how are you feeling about the Zone SS? Have you gotten your chance to put your hands on it and see how it flies for you? Let me know. Would love to sort of use the comment section to help guide future shoppers who may end up finding this video. But for now, we're going to leave you with the birdie.